Many educators are forced to create materials and resources for their students from scratch.
It doesn't have to continue to be this way.
If you support curricula that's high quality, culturally relevant, and rooted in professional development and learning, join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
And sign on in support of these recommendations.
Curricula is too important to leave up to individual schools.
And we need the city to lead on this.
Welcome. It's good to see so many familiar faces. It's been a while since we've had a larger event in New York due to the pandemic, so it's so great to be back in person with everybody. My name is Evan Stone. I am one of the co-founders and co-CEOs of Educators for Excellence, along with Sydney Morris. We taught together at PS 86 in the Bronx, where we launched E4E, and it's been an amazing journey. Just for those of you that are new to our work, E4E is grounded in a simple premise, that for far too long, teachers have been subjects of change rather than agents of change. And so we work to flip that on its head and empower teachers to drive changes that they want to see in the system. And we do that in a couple ways. We have a team of amazing organizers in New York that are in schools every day talking to educators about the problems they want to see. We bring teacher leaders together to develop their skills and understanding of policy and organizing and advocacy. We help them craft recommendations, and then we run campaigns to drive change around those. And then we also encourage teachers to get more involved with their union to ensure the most powerful voice in education policy is representative of educators across the system. So that's what our work's about. But tonight is a very special night because we're digging into a set of recommendations that many of you have worked on and that was informed by hundreds of teachers across the city. Around the thing that impacts all of our students and all of our classrooms, and that's the content that we teach and the support that teachers have to implement that content, our curriculum. So the recommendations tonight are pretty simple, and I'm gonna let the educators talk more about it when they get up here. But first, it's grounded in a problem that for far too long in New York, we've allowed a school-by-school process of decision-making around curriculum that's resulted in some schools having high-quality curriculum, great support, great training, and I've talked to some of you tonight that have that, and then other schools that are lacking a curriculum, where teachers are spending their time online the week before, sometimes even the night before, searching for content to deliver to their kids. And it can't be that way anymore. The research is too clear that we need high quality, culturally relevant curriculum that our students can connect to and achieve amazing things from. So the three recommendations that we're talking about tonight, first is that our curriculum needs to be grounded in the science of learning and needs to be high quality, and so we are asking the district to narrow the set of options to ensure that teachers have access to things that are high quality. Second, that it needs to be culturally relevant. We think there should be a process of engaging educators and principals and parents and communities in talking about the curriculum that really shares and represents their identities. And third, that our professional learning is embedded into the curriculum, so that our training for educators isn't one-off, isn't flyby, isn't from somebody that comes into the school, but is actually embedded in the content that we are teaching. And so I'm thrilled tonight to have the Chancellor here and Deputy Chancellor Quintana, who I'll introduce in a second, because this administration has showed a real commitment, beginning in K2 and around literacy, but also for our neurodiverse students to ensure that we are having resources and supports that allow all kids to achieve. I've seen them talk to educators about this across the system, and I'm really encouraged by the direction that they're headed and looking forward to hearing what they have to say tonight. But you're gonna not have to listen to me talk all night, you're gonna get to listen to your fellow educators, which is the goal of E4E, to put your voices front and center. So in a second, I'm gonna welcome up to stage, I'll say everybody's name, and then you can come on up. 5 amazing educators, James Antwine, Deirdre Levy, Tricia Mason, Amaryllis Torello, and Betty Nieves, who's a former educator at the UFT Teacher Center. So if the 5 of you could come up and let's give them a round of applause. And they're going to be joined on stage by a man who needs little introduction, Chancellor David Banks. And the Deputy Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, I know you as Deputy Chancellor Quintana, I'm sorry, Carolyn Quintana. Q. Apologies. And what I will say is, Deputy Chancellor Quintana and Chancellor Banks are also, at their core, educators. Both have been teachers in the system, principals in the system. Deputy Chancellor Quintana was a superintendent. So this is really a conversation of educators, for educators, and by educators. And so with that, James, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
Check. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, panelists.
Evening.
Good evening, friends. Thank you for being here. I know you guys are incredibly busy. Chancellor, we're going to start out with you. We want to start out by giving you a couple of minutes to share your vision. In such a diverse city, what is your vision in delivering a 21st century, culturally relevant public school education to every New York City student?
First of all, let me just say thank you for inviting me to be here this evening. It really is a real pleasure for me to be here, not only with all of you who are on the stage, but to all of you who, after a long school day, still took the time to come out here this evening. And I'm sure from all over the city. Anybody here from Brooklyn? What about the BX? Woo! All right. Queens? Anybody come here? Oh. Wow. Staten Island? Come on, you can just, no. You're supposed to get the biggest ovation. You came the longest way. Well, thank you all, and Manhattan. I guess I almost kind of assumed we're already in Manhattan. How many people from Manhattan? Harlem, wherever you're from, absolutely. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me and giving me a reason to be here. Many of you know I am a product of the New York City Public Schools, from Head Start, right, all the way through 12th grade. I'm a Brooklyn, Queens kid. I was born in Brooklyn, was in Brooklyn until I was about 12 years old in Crown Heights. Mom and dad, my dad was a police officer, and then we bought a house in Southeast Queens, and we moved out there, and I spent pretty much my teenage years in Queens. The New York City schools were a good experience for me, and have been a good experience for lots of kids. But there are a whole lot of kids where they have not been served well enough by our schools. And my very first day as chancellor, and I was coming into the Tweed Courthouse, and there was a gentleman outside with a sign the sign said, if we would just teach our kids to read. And his name was Bill, and I went over and I introduced myself to him. And the guy who was driving me at the time, he said, "Oh, don't waste your time going over there, he's crazy. He's been standing out in front of the building for 10 years. And he had. Rain, sleet, shine, whatever. This guy was out there. He was a former educator from Ohio, and I introduced myself to him. And I said, I absolutely agree with you. 65% of black and brown children in New York City never achieve reading proficiency. Think about that. And he said, if you get the reading thing right, you will save so much money. You solve so many other problems. And I said, I totally agree with you. And he said, and for the record, by the way, I just want you to know, I've been out here for 10 years. You're the first chancellor that's ever said a word to me. So it also tells you something, right? That you would just drive by every single day and walk by and just write the man off. I see the school system as being populated with tremendous talent, not only in our young people, but in our educators who care deeply about our kids. But I think we've been giving many of you the wrong tools to be successful. And for me, it starts with a literacy foundation. It is the number one thing that we have committed ourselves to as an administration, that by the time we are done, we fully expect that we will have established a foundation that every child will be on grade level no later than the 3rd grade for reading. That is critically important. And then we make lots of choices around the kinds of materials that we will populate as it relates to reading. We want to make sure that there is, in fact, diverse curricula. And Deputy Chancellor Quintana will talk to you about a number of things that we are doing. She leads most of this work in this place and space. She has a magnificent team, but she is the leader of the team. So, you know, when I was at Eagle Academy, we did a lot of work with black and brown boys. And then I engaged in a partnership with Scholastic, where we curated a library that really, there were hundreds of books that were really about black and brown boys and to really speak to their interests. And so the work that we use, the curricular choices that we make have to be, we have to be sensitive from a curricular and a cultural standpoint, but we have to make sure that everything that we use is rigorous, that teachers are properly trained, and that our young people, if we want to do the right thing to help all of our young people, we have to ensure, must ensure, that everybody has a solid reading foundation. We also have a lot of work to do in math and lots of other areas, but we're placing a very big bet on this focus around literacy and establishing that as a solid foundation. 25, 30 years ago, New York City schools, and as well as school systems around the nation, shifted from this phonetic approach to the teaching of reading to this whole language approach. And we think the results are in, and it has not worked for far too many of our kids. I'm a big believer in your platform, which is that we ought not lay out all of these options across the board and just let people just do whatever they want to do. We have to narrow those options to ensure success and be able to lead an administration with fidelity. So I believe in that. We'll be talking more about that this evening, but just know that we are in direct alignment with IFAE's position in this place and space, and look forward to engaging you as real strategic partners with us in the work as well. But that's what I see.
I like what you said about direct alignment with IFAE. That's really important.
Yes.
Thank you, Chancellor. I'm a Brooklyn, Queens person myself. New York Public Schools is making an effort to improve early literacy in grades K through 2, just like you talked about, by ensuring that the curriculum is actually grounded in the science of reading. Even with this effort, many elementary schools are still using reading and writing workshop, including my own school, and I'm a self-contained special education teacher, which we know doesn't include phonics. Our recommendations ask you to have an approved curriculum for all grades and subjects, not just K through 2 literacy. What would it take to narrow curriculum options so that all schools can only select curriculum options that have been vetted and approved by the district? How can we ensure that a change like this happens so we don't have the same problem we're seeing in elementary schools right now?
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to turn to Q in just a moment. When I would visit schools, I would talk to different groups. A lot of times people would say to me, you know, we know our kids best, like at our schools. We know what they need. We don't need Central to tell us what to do. That is true in certain respects, but on this curricular side, I don't think that is true. I think the entire system, and it is a large and amazing system, needs more clarity, more direction, and we, in fact, absolutely need to narrow some of those choices in terms of what we're doing. We can't just have a free-for-all, because the results that we're seeing now are a result of a free-for-all. So we're going to be making adjustments to that. But our Deputy Chancellor Quintana, who is part of our dream team, I'm thrilled to have her on board, and she's leading this work for us. We affectionately refer to her as Q, and so you can all refer to her as Q as well. Q, what say you?
Thank you, and hi everybody. That's part of the reason that Evan couldn't remember my first name is I'm just Q. I'm perfectly fine with that. I agree. We need to make sure that we're thinking about how we're grounding the work that we do. Evan said in the science of learning, and I heard you say in the science of reading, and both of those are important, right? There's a science of learning and development that we know tells us what kids need in an ecosystem in order to thrive. Not just kids. what all learners, adults as well, need in terms of an ecosystem in order to thrive. And that means anything from that caring community to those high quality instructional materials and all of those pedagogical practices that are part of that too, right? And so we're focusing very much on the core, and in terms of literacy very specifically, we need to ground it in what we know about how students' brains work and about how they actually learn to read. And reading is this cumulative thing. We don't just get to pick and choose what we're going to throw at them and hope that it sort of sticks, or ask them to really become good at inferring, which is what we do right now. When you're asking them to cue, when you're asking them to use the picture, you're asking them to infer. And that requires a great deal of background knowledge and does not actually teach them to read. And so you see that in early grades where kids have beautiful memories and have, books that have very similar things happening. They get it, and they can kind of work through it, and then all of a sudden, as things become more complex, that's when we start to see that gap and that frustration, and you especially experience that in classrooms where kids maybe don't have that same level of processing or memory because they require other strategies that can help them make meaning, right? And I remember I myself was trained in the Lucy Calkins method. I was trained very much to be someone who knew about 7 habits of a proficient reader and 3Qing and all of these wonderful things that I thought were great for creating a space where kids love to read. But the reality is if they didn't know how to do it, and so in high school we actually brought in things that had broken down phonemes. And so in high school we were using, and at the time it was System 44, and Read 180, and they were very structured programs, and whatever you say about those very specific programs, but it allowed my teachers to understand and for me to really get a sense of what does it mean in high school for children who may have missed these pieces, whether they were English language learners or they never had this experience. And I know now the difference in what I did as a teacher and as a leader, and I sit with that every day, right? And it's not a good place to be sometimes. And so I know that as a system, we need to do things differently, grounded in what we know works. And what we know works is what we're going to push to. And so we're committed to ensuring that every classroom K through 5 has a curriculum that is grounded in the science of reading. Now that's not as easy as just making that statement right here. There's a lot that goes into that. And those are conversations that fortunately we've had with Evan and the team a couple of times and have asked for all of you to be part of that process with us too as we engage community, because that means training leaders. We're going to be launching letters training for all principals this spring. And letters is program agnostic. It's just making sure everyone understands what the science of reading is in the first place and why it works the way it does. Then we'll work into what it looks like to have very specific curricular training. Because yes, if you do not have that professional learning directly linked to the curriculum, it's very hard to attach what it is that you should be doing to create the right environment for your students. But it's also very hard then to commit that to memory and to practice and make that part of your muscle as a teacher. And so we want to make sure that that training and that development is ongoing. It's not a one and done, it's ongoing, that you receive support throughout the years, plural, there was an S there, right? So that you can implement, not just with fidelity, but with confidence. We need you to feel efficacious in what you do. And that means that you have to have confidence as much as competence. You have to have a deep understanding and the right resources in place with support. And that's going to take time for us to do,
Absolutely.
But we're committed to it.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, and I'm going to talk money and time. That's my question. So right now we have federal recovery dollars that need to be spent by the 24-25 school year. We know that these funds need to be spent on one-time costs, as they are one-time dollars. We think investing in curriculum and professional learning, thank you for that training piece, is the right place to use these dollars. Now, as a result, this shift would need to occur over the next 2 years. What would it take to begin the process of narrowing curriculum options and ensuring all teachers have access to high-quality, culturally relevant resources in time to use these federal recovery dollars to pay for this shift?
Well, I think that's part of what Q was just really talking about. She's already been engaged in that process. There's a wide range of things that we've been using with these short-term stimulus dollars, which you're right, are going to be running out. And so there are a lot of tough decisions that were made. You know, one of the big challenges we have with the recovery dollars, you know, the UPK and 3K really was built on recovery dollars that are running out. And so we got major issues that we're going to have to deal with financially and in terms of paying for that, as well as other programs. It's one of the challenges when you get short-term dollars. You have to be very careful what you in fact invest in, and because otherwise it does put you in a tough place. But I do think that this is a place and space that sets itself up for us to actually be in real conversation, and the work. You know, maybe we have a work group from this organization that can work together with us around taking a look at some of these issues, and really do everything we can to fortify some of the recommendations that you're making. Because as I said at the beginning, I am very much in alignment with it. We have to delve very deeply into the details. But the goal for us is, in fact, to go into the next school year with a much greater degree of clarity for all of our schools, and there's a much greater degree of direction and support for our schools, ensuring that we're going to be on a path towards success.
So I'm hearing a commitment here? Using
Yeah.
these federal dollars for that purpose?
Well, no, you haven't heard that
Actually,
commitment yet.
curriculum.
No. What you heard was a commitment for us to work together with you. There are a lot of things that are taken into consideration around these federal dollars. Trust me. I have conversations every single day with a dwindling pot of dollars. I don't know if you've ever been a part of any of the PEP meetings. Anybody here ever see one of these PEP meetings? So, and if you haven't, I would encourage you, as teachers, the panel for educational policy sets the tone for what happens in a lot of our schools from a policy perspective. If you've not ever participated in a PEP, and you're engaged in coming out the E4E, I would suggest pay attention to the PEP, what goes on. These are meetings that start at 6 o'clock at night. We've been doing them virtually, thank goodness. Because they start at 6 o'clock at night and are known to go to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And these are your colleague teachers. These are parents and community folks who come out and whose voices are heard on a whole host of issues, just like this. And so I would certainly invite go on the website and check it out and find out the panel for educational policy. The next meeting is on the 25th, next week. And you just have to register and log on. You register if you want to speak. Otherwise, you just log on and you can bear witness to what's going on. And I'm just saying that because these kinds of issues, the issues of what we're doing with our dollars, the contracts, what are we doing with the stimulus dollars, these are the things that we talk about at the panel for educational policy. So you want to pay attention to what's happening there. We're looking at stuff happening all across the entire system.
Thank you, Chancellor, and welcome. Thank you again for taking the time to meet with us and for inviting Deputy Chancellor Q to join us as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
One of the 4 pillars of your vision of New York Public Schools is prioritizing wellness for student success. How can SEL be integrated into curricula and PD to ensure all educators have the quality resources, support, and well-being to deliver equitable and excellent service to the whole student? Can you share how you and your team are working to prioritize this?
You know, and again, this is Deputy Chancellor will lean in as well and talk about some of the things that we have been doing. One of the more recent things that is coming, it's not even really out just yet, but it's coming, is this whole notion about mindfulness. You all know the mayor's story, right? And the mayor and health and wellness is a critical part of who he is and what he deeply believes in. You know, he almost lost some of his limbs to diabetes, and he changed his diet, and it made all the difference in the world. And he has a deep and abiding sense that we are not properly educating our young people about health and wellness and eating the right kinds of foods, and how that ultimately plays out into Americans who are just not as healthy as we need to be. We have a lot of bad habits. But if we start when they're younger, that it can make all the difference in the world. Somebody might not see that as SEL, but in many ways it really is. Breathing. Anybody in this room practice breathing, mindfulness, right? Like, that is fantastic. And I've been pleasantly surprised as I've traveled around the city to see how many schools are actually already engaging in this work. Not just for themselves as individual educators, but the work that they're actually doing with their young people and their students in schools. It's been very inspiring to see that. We are working with a number of groups right now as we begin to try to lay out something for next year around mindfulness. Teaching young people to center themselves. I had a news flash for you. The pandemic was not the first challenge that a lot of our kids have ever faced. And it won't be the last. We have to teach them the life skills that they need to know that in the face of trauma and challenge, how to center yourself. Many of us need to learn those skills as well. Right? I mean, just old-fashioned stuff. When stuff would be going down, folks would say, breathe. Take a deep breath, count to 10. Don't react immediately. Those are the principles of mindfulness that have to be practiced. It's an art. And when you do that, you allow yourself to center yourself, to go deeper within yourself. And it can help you in so many situations. It can help you when you're preparing for a high-stakes exam. Lord have mercy, right? There are just so many things that we can do. We are looking at rolling out 2 to 3 minutes of breathing technique for every student in New York City schools as we go into next school year. We're actually going to be starting some of that even mid-year. So it is one of the things that are coming. We just got 1 year under our belt as a new administration. And there's a lot of things that we have done, but there's so many more things that we are working on that will be coming out. And that's just one. But Q has been leading a lot of other work around SEL. You want to talk a little bit about some of the other things we're doing?
Sure. And so really important, obviously, that we're thinking about socio-emotional and well-being in general. So there's food education that we're starting to look into very specifically with the sociocultural and sociopolitical lens. There are other ways that we're thinking about how we center student wellness that are through the arts and really ramping up the work that we're doing around the arts. And then there's really specific work. So there's socio-emotional and academic development work, SEED work, that is centered in both the tenets from Castle, but also the research that comes out of the University of Chicago's consortium, really thinking about academic mindsets, that sense of belonging that every student has in the classroom, what it means when the work has value and when you value the work, the belief that they can succeed because a teacher has created that kind of a space or an environment in that classroom, and the belief that with effort, their confidence and competence can grow. So that efficacy piece, and really helping teachers to figure out what are the strategies that you use to create that in your classes. And some of that actually was built in work that I was doing as a principal with one of the teachers who's seated over here, but I won't call him out specifically. And some of that work has been developed over with some of the teams that we have that have been doing some of that continuously, and now we're actually piloting it across different schools. And so we're really excited about not separating, and it's still very important. If you use, the mood meters and all of those wonderful resources in your school, it's a great start. It allows, in the same way that mindfulness lets you be in tune with what is happening as opposed to tuning things out, so do those meters and things like that, right? They give you language, they give you pictures that you can use so that kids really have emotions that they can talk about. But the socio-emotional and academic component tells you to integrate those pieces because it's incredibly important for you to think about what is my experience as a Black boy in a math classroom? What is my experience as someone who just left a really tense experience in my household to come into first period, right? All of these pieces, and then how do I center on vocabulary lessons or science or whatever else it is that's happening when I have stereotype threat, I have what I'm experiencing, and I have what the teacher brings to the table as well. And so that's that seed work that we're doing that is really about understanding what it means to be centered and well.
I thank you for addressing that. I'm blessed to say that this makes my heart smile because at my building, I teach at a Massachusetts in Queens, we address this. We treat the student as a whole. And we know our students. We value our students. And our students know that on each floor, there are 3 key people that they can go to, if not more. beginning with their assistant principal, their dean,
There you go.
their guidance counselor,
Right.
myself, the coordinator of student affairs. Just yesterday, my assistant principal was sitting on the audience. I'm going to give her a shout out, Ms. Augustine. During lunch duty, she brought me a student having a panic attack. She knew the student was having, a panic attack. Mr. Rello, can the student sit in your office?
Yep.
She ran and got the student a cup of water. So again, that communication.
Right.
We are blessed to have that in our building, but
Sure.
I know when I speak to many other educators that come visit, or when I visit other schools at a PD,
Yep.
I know when Sean joined us from Educators from Excellence, she was surprised. He said, wow, you are doing a lot. I wish I saw this in every building.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to that. It's making sure that it's not that one student that goes to Elizabeth Blackwell Messutan.
Right.
It's the student that goes to 202. It's the student that goes to Pier 60, to a school in the Bronx, Staten Island, Manhattan, Brooklyn. Everyone should have that support system, but sadly, not every single educator has the means. Not every PD is enforcing what we get exposed to.
Right.
We are lucky to have that. We're lucky to have an administration that allows us to offer the services to our students.
Well, let me say this to you, because again, a complete agreement with you. And different schools do it different ways, and some schools are not doing it all, sometimes because they just don't know. So one of the pillars that we've established is to scale, sustain, and restore what works. And I recently brought somebody back who used to work with us at New York City Public Schools. He spent the last several years in Dubai doing some work there, and I brought him back to kind of lead that work for Ron Kennedy. And what that work is ultimately going to be is to go to schools like yours, go to other schools, and we want to capture the best in class. What are those programs that you have that everybody in the system needs to see? Exactly. It shouldn't be that a child who's lucky enough to be in your school and part of your tutelage gets what they need, but the school around the corner doesn't even have a clue about the programming that you're doing. We want to help them have a clue. We want to help make sure that it's not a secret, that we share best practice across
Absolutely.
the city. And I want it to the point, I don't have my phone with me, I left it in the car. But I want to have it where every teacher can pick up their phone, and we're going to have a platform, and you'll just be able to log in and say, if you want to see the best in class on social emotional learning, you are going to be able to see, you'll hear from the principal, you'll be able to see the teachers who are driving, you'll see the program, you'll be able to see it even without visiting the school. We're going to bring it to you, right to the palm of your hand. And that's going to cover, you want to see the best physics teacher in the city. You will be able to learn from your colleagues who are doing this work. We're going to look to knock down those walls between the schools so that everybody, no matter where you are, so if you're coming from Staten Island, or you're in Queens, Brooklyn, or right here in Manhattan, wherever you are, right at your fingertips, you will have access to real-time stuff where you can see what people are doing and you can learn from them, because everybody needs to get better.
Yes.
Everybody needs to get better. And this school system has been designed for winners and losers. And when you have losers, those are kids. Those are families.
Yes.
Those are communities. We are working hard to ensure that everybody can win. That's what this is supposed to be all about. And so I don't care if it's a charter school, traditional public school, big school, small school, a theme-based school, whatever it is. Everybody has something to offer up that we can all learn from. That's what we are trying to mine, trying to cultivate. So again, there are a lot of things that we have to do. We don't get the chance to do it all on day one. But we just finished our first year, but we're zeroing in now on scaling, sustaining, and restoring what works, and we think it will lift up promising practice all across the city.
We have also just launched Lighthouse, which is our first round of schools that will be sharing with one another. And you don't necessarily have to be an exemplary school.
Right.
There's a practice that you are either developing and want to share with others, or something that you want to share in terms of the process. Anyone here who knows whether or not their school is a Lighthouse school? Fantastic. Great.
All right.
Yay.
All right.
Wonderful. Good to hear. That's first round of Lighthouse schools, and it will keep going. So, keep an eye out for the applications, and if you have something that you'd like to be a part of learning with other schools and other colleagues, by all means, please encourage your schools to apply.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Chancellor and Deputy Q, I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thank you for going in depth on your answers and taking time to explain everything in full. I appreciate that, from how to re-implement phonics, what you're going to do with the funding for the 4 pillars. I appreciate every response that you're giving to us.
Thank you.
My question to you today is based on your experience so far as a chancellor. You have built a number of working groups that have made recommendations like the funding for formulas, the Black Studies, early literacy, other programs like that,
Sure.
right? We want to know, we think it's critical to build a similar diverse working group to help in narrowing the curriculum options for those that are curricularly, culturally relevant. And this something that you will consider to support? Is this something you will consider to support, the teaching and learning transformation that you will have called for so far? And what is your process in launching such smaller groups to help with?
Sure. No, absolutely. In fact, why don't you talk a little bit about what we're doing with the Literacy Task Force and how the connections that perhaps are made to that as well?
Sure. So we just launched the Literacy Advisory Council, and we're launching an advisory council for revising and rethinking special education. And both of those are connected. So we also have a Digital Literacy Advisory Council. All of those are connected to the curricular work, but especially the Literacy Advisory Council. They were the first ones to really push us to stop talking about and make sure that we're starting to make changes about the curricular pieces. And fortunately, in alignment with what we were thinking and what E4E was sort of demanding. So it all worked out. But really important for us, one of the things that we did too, we had the team read street data. I don't know, anybody read street data? Yeah, so a big part of street data is not only making sure that those voices that are not typically heard are heard, but it's about making sure that the community is a part of that decision making. And so really important for us is to have different levels of partners and stakeholders be part of that conversation. For curriculum, we're actually going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of having the advisory council that serves a sort of external purpose in that way, we're going to actually involve different groups of people. And so one of the conversations we had with E4E is, can you help us in each of the sort of superintendencies to engage the community in those ways? And so we're looking at, starting with K through 5, convening superintendents, and then separately having focus groups for teachers and principals. Too many teachers and principals in the system to actually convene all of you, and so focus groups will work in that way to meet with us. We'll also survey folks to find out a little bit of information, and we're visiting schools. So we're actually going around and visiting schools to see the curricula that's currently in place, what it's leading to, and the most important part is it being implemented with fidelity? If not, what do we need to do differently to help people get there? And so we're gathering information from people on site in that way as well. And so there's a lot of that work that's happening because we want to make sure that this process of rolling out new curricula for K through 5 and of helping make decisions, and that folks are part of that process, and we'll use that to learn for when we move on to 6 through 8 and then 9 through 12 as well, particularly because those will be different processes. And so we need to make sure that with each of these, we include folks in that and are able to make those decisions. We're also basing it on research, right? And so there are already vetted curricula, there are reports that are available nationally, and we have a great deal of research that we look into as well, so that it's always informed.
I appreciate that you saying the smaller groups and the research you're going to have with the principals and the teachers formulate the groups, because when you say confidence meets competence, that's where we have to have us confident enough to pass it on to the students so they're confident when they're taking the test and speaking up and going back even to the phonetic basics of it all. Not just the whole sight word, but back to the thing that helped us. I was a product of the phonetics boundary, the initial, how we started with letters, with sounds, and that helped you. So when you got stuck, you saw a sight word, you was always able to sound it out, and that's where we started. I live up the street from Eagle Academy, so I see your hand at work all the time.
Which one? In which borough?
In Queens.
In Queens, okay, yep.
I'm also a fellow Hillcrestian. So
Are you really?
Graduated from the same school.
Come on.
Yes. I have the same knowledge. I was right behind you.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm that product of that environment, so I want to pass it on and give them the confidence they need to go and proceed out here in the society.
I love it. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
I appreciate you.
And by the way, I was at Hillcrest. I've been at I've been to Hillcrest 3 times since I've been chancellor. In this 1 year.
And invite me one time.
I had not been to Hillcrest in 40 years. I was part of the class of 1980 when I graduated. To this day, the greatest sense of accomplishment that I've ever had was when I got voted as the senior class vice president.
Okay,
Like, I'm telling you, yeah. Huh? Oh yeah, way more than the chancellor.
He was
Absolutely.
politically
Yeah.
He was politically
Yeah, because I got to be the chancellor. I got selected by the mayor. To be the vice president of the senior class of Hillcrest High School, all the seniors had to vote.
Yes.
And you have no idea how affirming that is. I remember that moment to this day. Mr. Gecko, he was the COSA, and they had the vote, and they were supposed to make the announcement, and they didn't tell us that they were making it. And I saw Mr. Gecko in the hallway as I was going to the homeroom. And he walked by, he just said hello. Then I got in the room, and they said, we're making the final announcements about the winners of the... And I said, oh, no. I must have lost, because maybe that's why he didn't want to say anything to me in the hallway. And for treasurer, they announced Jeffrey Osborne. For secretary, Stacy, Sherelle Haley. I remember all the names, trust me. They said, for vice president. Then he felt like he waited for 15 minutes before he said anything. David Banks. It was like, and my whole class, the whole homeroom went crazy. I went running through the halls. And Wayne Johnson, he got elected president. And I'm still very close with all of that people from that class. But I had never been back to Hillcrest. But I've been back now 3 times for different events there. And it's amazing. And I think about the experience that I had at Hillcrest was a wonderful experience. What can I do as chancellor to ensure that every child in every school across the city has the same kinds of experiences that I've had? It is easier said than done because the system is so large. A lot of times we talk about the largeness of the system, the diversity, the breadth of it. You have no idea until you really sit in the seats that Q and I are in. The whole world lives here. The whole world lives in New York. You know how many languages we speak in our New York City schools? Over 700 languages.
Yes.
There's no other place that's even close to this. And so there's no one thing that you say that it's like, okay, everybody, you're speaking like for everybody. On its face, that's flawed. But what we certainly intend to do on certain things is to lean in as heavily as we possibly can to ensure, and this curricular stuff that you are talking about, and you're stating as your platform, I think is critically important. There are places and spaces for innovation and other things that we can do. But there's some places that we need to put a stake in the ground, say this is what we're doing, and we're going to do this for everybody, and we're going to ensure that everybody at least gets a baseline that we can then move from that baseline. That's what we're doing. You'll be hearing more about that.
All right. Can we get a big round of applause for the Chancellor, Deputy Chancellor, Teachers? So I know a lot of you filled out note cards with questions. I saw how big the stack is. We're not going to get through all of them. But Brendan has pulled a few out, so we're going to call up at least 3 educators to ask a few quick questions. Sure. I know you have a hard stop, but you were a little late, so we're going to keep you a little long.
Yeah, just a couple minutes.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to call the names of the people whose questions we selected. So it's going to be Kendra McKenzie. We're going to try to do 3 if that's cool. We're going to do Kendra McKenzie's question first, and then Evans Barreau and Carlotta Pope, please. If you could just line up behind me right here.
And for all the other questions, we'll gather them and we'll give them to the district. We can't get all the answers now, but we'll try to get you answers to a lot of the other questions in follow-up.
Sure. Yep, that's great.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kendra McKenzie. I'm an educator. I work in downtown Brooklyn at City Polytechnic High School. I also have an educational podcast called Hall Past Break.
What's it called?
Hall Past Break, and you have been on it. So just want to let you know.
Oh, yeah, that's
City
right.
and State, yes. And Quintana, I would like to say that I worked with you at Columbus High School in the Bronx at Astor Collegiate Academy, so good to see you.
Yes, I recognize your face, so yes.
Thanks. So my question is that, I'm so sorry.
You and D'Angelo?
Yes. Right. So my question is, we know the current U of T contract is about to expire. Is there space to pay teachers more in return for higher quality instruction, especially in school communities that were most impacted by the pandemic?
That's always a difficult question. It's one that's tough for me to answer sitting on the stage here, right? We've established a good working relationship with the U of T. I've established a good working relationship with Michael Mulgrew. So all things are on the table. We have a number of things. We're engaged right now in negotiations for a new contract. So I would certainly encourage E4E, if you've got a platform around the contract of things that you think we should be fighting for, please share them with me. We'll certainly take it under consideration. You know, paying different teachers in different parts of the city or in different subject areas is always, different salaries has always been a point of contention. There's arguments for and against that. But certainly, if you all feel strongly about that, and it's not just a question being posited by one person, but if there's a position being taken by the organization, feel free to share that and let us take a look at it. But it hasn't been done up until now. It is not an easy thing to make happen. There are some teachers in some shortage areas, and some teachers who teach certain subjects that folks might say, you know, should be paid more. There are teachers who work in certain parts of the city who folks feel like, hey, they should be making more than others. But it can be a bit of a challenge when you're all part of the same union. But share it with me. I'll take a look at it.
Good evening, all. My name is Evans Buell. I'm from Brooklyn. Question I have for you. 1 out of 3 teachers reported that their schools are not meeting the needs of the queer, transgender, and gender nonconforming students. What are NYPC doing to address this lack of support, and how can the problem be addressed via curriculum and professional development?
We've been doing a lot of stuff in that area, and Deputy Chancellor will talk a little bit about some of what we've been doing.
Yep, so we actually have a team that is committed to helping schools to develop, whether it's organizations or platforms that are to support our LGBTQ plus youth. In addition to that, we've also built under Hidden Voices, which is part of Passport to Social Studies, an LGBTQ plus curriculum that is already available. Your schools should have received posters. There are curricular resources, some really, really wonderful lessons, comic books, a great deal of resources that are meant to ensure that we're lifting up voices that maybe haven't been part of our history in the past. And so that's part of it as well. And we'll continue to do that work, right? Because I think it's twofold. There needs to absolutely be the social and social emotional, as well as the content specific piece. And so we'll continue to do both of those pieces. If you feel like your school in particular needs support, by all means, please reach out. That is an area where we want to help support. The other piece is, you probably know that you have access to Sora, which is a digital, a virtual library, right? And so there are a number of texts that are available that kids can access, depending on whether you're in high school, middle school, elementary, that include a number of topics like these. And so we have a great deal of investment and resources in all of our populations, and encourage you to reach out if you need support.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And anytime we see issues like that, right, it's really more about the culture as well. So we can give all kinds of resources and materials and supports, but it's the culture of a school. It's the culture, the leadership at the school, and just the culture of all the people who work there, what they tolerate and what they will not tolerate. And so building culture in a school is also not easy to do. There are lots of schools around the city that already have very strong culture. And then there are others who need a lot of work. And so, you know, we've got to continue to lean in and support those schools that are not where they need to be, and supporting every single one of their children in their schools.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kings and Queens, Chancellor, Madam Deputy. What are your thoughts on requiring a unit in financial literacy as a requirement for graduation? Are there other real-world skills that your administration is interested in developing with our students?
You know, it's interesting. So what you heard me say at the opening was about building that solid foundation, that literacy foundation. It's what I refer to as bright starts. But the other part of that is what we call bold futures, right? And that's really kind of the mantra that we work from, bright starts and bold futures. And you need the bright start in many ways in order to have the bold future. That's why we've placed such a heavy bet on this literacy piece. But the bold futures really is about the career pathways work. You know, creating opportunities for young people once they graduate, that they have the kinds of skills and credentials that they need to step out of our schools. Think about this. From kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, we spend about $350,000 per student. Some of you never probably thought of it that way, right? That's not as much money as the private schools spend, but it's still a significant amount of money. And I remember talking to an investment banker one day who posed a question to me. He said, I'm a taxpayer of New York City, $350,000 for one child, my child. What is my return on investment as a taxpayer? What kind of young person should I expect is going to come out from this system that you started over here in kindergarten, that's going through all these years? Financial literacy is something that I'm absolutely looking at, how to potentially expand on that, not just as a requirement of a particular course, but as a thread that would run all the way through. Not like, you know, we wait all of the years to get to the 12th grade and now we're going to do one unit on, you know, right now it stands wrapped up in the space in the economics course in the senior year. But that does not suffice for what we're talking about, preparing young people for the 21st century economy. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and it must be woven all the way through. It's just another one of the many things that we're looking at to reimagine how we help our young people. But it is a critically important one, and I'm glad that you raised it, because think about this. We are graduating so many of our young people who have no clue about finances. They don't even know how to open up a bank account. They have no idea about how money is made in America, Wall Street, how to invest in the stock market. They don't have a clue. And then how to save, how you know. But then you couple that, watch this, you couple that with young people who are graduating from our schools who have no clue about civic engagement. They couldn't tell you what the city council person does versus what the state assembly person does. But I got news for you. There are a whole lot of adults who don't know either. I see a lot of head nodding. So let me drop another one on you and see how this lands. There are a number of you in this room that don't know. Don't step to the mic just yet. Let me say this. Let me finish with this. No, and I want you to get this. Because if I offered all of you up, right? Sometimes we sit in judgment of our kids. We're all-knowing educators. If I told a whole bunch of you right now, you couldn't leave this room until you could pass the test on civic engagement. Do you know what the state attorney general does versus the state senator? Do you know the distinction between what a U.S. attorney does versus the district attorney? These are completely different roles. Many of our educators who sit in judgment of our kids, if you had to pass that test before you could leave, some of you would be here all night. So what does that suggest? That suggests that even many of us who've gone through a system where we have passed a certain standard, where we have gotten degrees, and we have been told we are ready to now go and teach, there's a lot that we don't know. A lot that we don't. How many of us know what it's like to work at a place like Google or Microsoft or participate in the fintech industry or these kinds of businesses? Most of us as educators went to school. We were pretty good students. We liked school. We love kids. We want to give back. We come back. And And if you close your eyes and you look in our classroom, it might as well be 1935, except there's a smartboard in the front of the room. I'm just bringing the real to you. Okay? That's what it is. The whole entire system needs a re-engineering from top to bottom. You hope you understand me. That's not a criticism of our educators. We're going to need you to help us to deliver on this. We've got folks flying to outer space. We should not be in New York City with a $38 billion budget still talking about why kids can't read. It makes no sense. The media focuses on very small things like did we increase the ELA scores by 2 points or did the math scores go up by 3 points? Completely missing the mark. We have to prepare young people for a future that many of us have no idea what it's even going to look like. Which means we have to be equipped. We have to be equipped to understand how do you teach cooperative learning, critical thinking, innovation, all of those kinds of things. But the system has been designed to put you in a box. I'm trying to break this box and bust the box apart while I'm here. So we're going to need you to help us to do that. All right?
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, let's give it up one more time for Chancellor Banks, Deputy Chancellor Quintana. Such a rich